President Zelensky traveled to the White House the other week to collect his early Christmas present of nearly $2 billion in additional security assistance for Ukraine to be used on its ongoing war with Russia. Then days later, Ukraine received another $45 billion from the omnibus bill passed by Congress. This means that since the start of the war, the United States has given over $110 billion to aid Ukraine. That's a lot of money. The Washington establishment seems to think they have the authority to hand out blank checks to anyone who asks nicely, but there needs to be some sort of accountability to ensure the taxpayers' money is spent on what Congress says it supposedly is being spent on. That's why some Republicans push for oversight on Ukraine funding. But of course, the Democrats blocked it and even labeled it Russian propaganda.
I'm sorry, but the whole oversight of the spending on Ukraine thing makes me a little crazy for two reasons. Number one, the focus on that is part of Russian propaganda. All these stories about how the money isn't being spent wisely, it's going all over the place. Ukraine is spending the money really well. That's why they're winning.
And it's not just Ukraine. Look at what they've done on the border. The new bipartisan spending omnibus monstrosity takes $800 million from Customs and Border Patrol and gives it to FEMA through grants to pay for sheltering and other services. The broad appropriation will encourage more illegal immigrants to cross the border just to receive free shelter from our government. It also provides for an additional $1.5 billion for the Customs and Border Patrol for border management, but the money can't be used to hire officers, deport illegal aliens, or expand border security. So what's the point? There is a serious need for fiscal oversight in the Biden administration. Well, here now with reaction are two of the congressmen that are on it. Texas Congressman Pat Fallon, who used to be on the committee I was on, the Oversight Committee, along with Andy Harris, who's the congressman from Maryland, who's on the Appropriations Committee. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Congressman Harris, I want to start with you. How do we have oversight of what in the world is going on with all that money in Ukraine?
Well, we had a chance, Jason, when we passed the omnibus bill to put oversight language in. And again, the Democrats refuse. I can't understand that. We're printing this money. We're borrowing this money. Europe is lending money to Ukraine. We're giving it to Ukraine. And we can't actually ask for an inspector general to determine whether this money is going to the people and the places and the weaponry that it's supposed to go for.
Yeah, you would think after, what we saw happening with Afghanistan, the inspector general there told us that he thought that less than half the money actually made it all the way there. It was lining a lot of people's pockets on the way there. Congressman Fallon, I want to toggle and talk about immigration because you've been helping to champion what's going on with these NGOs. You hear that word NGO, or that acronym NGO, non-government organizations. What are you trying to get at, and where is all this money flowing? There's a lot moving there.
Well, Jason, the Democrats are gaming. They're playing this game of deception with the American people by claiming that U.S. tax dollars aren't going to facilitate illegal immigration or directly to the illegal migrants. But they are. Our money is going there through the NGOs. And this administration, in the DHS, with Alejandro Mayorkas, isn't being forthcoming and transparent to the American people, because we know that there's hundreds of millions of dollars, perhaps billions, going to these illegals and facilitating this migration through the NGOs, but they won't tell us how much. So I can't wait till we get into the majority so we can ask, when he's under oath, how much money is being sent to these illegals and what their plans going forward.
Now, Congressman Harris, I served with you in the Congress. It was an honor and a privilege to do so. I think it's fair to call you a fiscal hawk and somebody who just wants some basic accountability. Now that the Republicans have control, how do we do that? I mean, there's so much. It's such a target-rich environment. Where do you plan to spend your time and efforts?
Well, Jason, as you know, because you were in Congress, the appropriations bills come through. They have riders on them. They have language directing agencies, giving them directions. We need to do it through the appropriations bills. I think, these are some of the must-pass bills. These are the bills that have to pass every year. And let's have the argument. Let's find out why we need an inspector general if we spend the money here in the United States, but we don't need an inspector general if we spend $100 billion overseas protecting someone else's border while we're not protecting our border.
Yeah, I mean, that is the point, right? Congressman Fallon, what's your biggest concern now that you've been in Congress for a little bit? You're going into the 118th. You finally get to be in the majority for once. So what's your biggest concern that you're going to spend time and effort on?
Well, I'd like to. We are spending far too much money. DC's never had a revenue problem. We have a spending problem, and I think, Jason, the debt is the number one threat to our national security moving forward. So I'd really like to start that discussion again with a balanced budget amendment. I know that's pushing a boulder up a hill, but it almost happened 25 years ago. And I think that's number one, right, followed very closely by actually securing our southern border, as Andy just said. And, we can't understate the threat to China. I think those three things are very important to address immediately.
Yeah, Congressman Harris, Joe Biden says he's not going to do anything differently. I mean, you saw the election results and he said, I'm not going to do anything differently. Do you think the House can force the discussion on a big topic like term limits or, as Congressman Fallon said, something like a balanced budget amendment?
Well, my understanding is we will have a balanced budget amendment vote. Of course, it's going to die in the Senate because the Democrats control the Senate. But Americans should understand that, when we printed $4 trillion in the last few years, literally printed the money, it resulted in inflation over the past 2 years is 15%. Everything's higher. Everything's higher for Americans. It's because we can't get spending under control. And that's the way you have to explain to the American people. You have to balance your budget at home. We should have to balance our budget in Washington.
Seems like a simple premise. And you know what? Pass it out of the House and the Senate. Let the states decide. Let's see if 2/3 of them will ratify it and decide what's in for all. Are we going to balance our book? Or are we just going to keep printing this funny money? So, Congressman Fallon, Congressman Harris, good luck to you. Tuesday is going to be a big day. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, stay with us.